In this video, we've covered a lot of tools for writing your own JavaScript in Drupal. But you'll get the most out of your code if you can leverage the existing utilities and libraries that exist in Drupal already. So what I want to do is take a few minutes and cover all of the different utilities that we have to work with. And I'm not going to go into any of them in great detail. I'll reserve that for future videos. But I want you to have an idea of what's available to you as you start to build your own JavaScript interactivity on the site. Probably the richest library in Drupal is the jQuery UI library. And this contains utilities to trigger actions when things are dragged or dropped. It contains utilities for adding new effects and a wide variety of other items. So you can take a look at the jQuery UI website if you want to get a feel for all of the different utilities you have to work with, as well as see demonstrations and get example code so you can begin implementing code that leverages these libraries. Secondly, we talked about Ajax Forms in a previous video, but I just wanted to reiterate here that you can use the Ajax Drupal library in order to create dynamic forms that will grab data from the server and replenish certain sections of the form in order to create a very seamless user experience if a user needs to add additional items to a form. For example, they're filling out a form to register a family and they need to add new inputs for new family members. We've also demonstrated in the forms section how to use autocomplete in text inputs in order to allow the user to type in a few letters and then have that create a drop-down of options that they can either click or use the arrow keys to navigate to and click enter in order to pre-fill that element. And that can be really useful when using a search or adding in something like a username for a form. You see in several places in Drupal where there are drag and drop ordering mechanisms. For example, in the blocks or in the fields utility, you can drag an item from one section to another and have it automatically bump the other ones down. This is really useful, and you can use this utility in your own module as well if you have a good use case for it. One nice interface element that you'll see fairly often in Drupal is a progress bar that will show you the progress that's been made for a certain batch process. And you can leverage this as well if you have a batch process of your own. In Drupal, there's a JavaScript equivalent to the T function as well as the theme function. So you can use theme functions in your code as well as making your text translatable. There's a library called BBQ which allows you to create a hash button history. So if you have a very dynamic interface that allows the user to progress from one state to another without a page refresh, you can keep breadcrumbs of their trail as they move through things and dynamically allow them to move backwards through their trail using hashtags in the URL. That way the user can use the back button and forward button in their browser in order to navigate through that interface. Drupal includes a jQuery library that enables you to easily work with browser cookies and also includes some PHP utility functions to work with these cookies as well. We cover the use of these cookies in the Working with Users video, so you might want to check that out. There's a utility that will take a text input, and create a machine name from the value that's inside of that text input. So you see this in various places, such as when you establish a new field name or a new content type, and it will automatically take the text and remove any spaces and lowercase everything and replace spaces and hyphens with underscores, so it's a machine name that can then be exportable later on. When you scroll through long tables in Drupal, you might notice that there's a persistent header that allows you to know what the column names are even as you scroll down past the header. And you can use this utility in your own tables as well by setting certain parameters in the table theme function. There are several examples in Drupal where there are checkboxes in a table column that allow the user to select certain items that are in that table, And there's also a checkbox at the very top that allows the user to check and check all of the items, or uncheck and uncheck all of the items. So this can be a useful interface element when working with a lot of data. In most text areas in Drupal, you'll see a little grippy at the very bottom that allows the user to drag it to expand or contract the content area of the text area itself. And this can be a useful interface element when you're not sure how much space to give the user to compose their content. There are vertical tabs which you see when you compose a node that includes metadata about the node, including the author and the URL and so on. And you can use these vertical tabs in your interface if you have some content that you don't necessarily need the user to fill out right away, but you want to supply an optional interface in order for them to supply some additional data. There's the Farbtastic color selector, which you'll see in a lot of themes that allow you to select background colors for various elements. And if you have an area of your interface where you want to allow the user to select particular colors, the Farbtastic color selector is an excellent option. Two of the most obvious interface improvements in Drupal 7 include the administrative overlay and the shortcut bar. And while the use of these is mostly automatic, it can help to understand how they work in order to make sure that your module can interact properly with them. And finally, if you're ever curious about the additional utilities available to you, you can always search the Drupal core file structure for JavaScript files, so .js files, and you can also do a breakpoint in a debugger during the hook library alter function, or you can add something like var dump or print r inside of that in order to see what libraries are being defined by Drupal or by any additional modules that you've installed.